Hello everyone. In this video, I will be discussing the mind map of the story, The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. The Last Lesson is a short story by Alphonse Daudet. It describes how the civilians were impacted when the two French districts of Alsace and Lorraine passed into Prussian hands after a war in 1871. According to the new order, the teaching of French was to be discontinued in the schools of these two districts and only German was to be taught. Alphonse Daudet (1840 to 1897) was born in Nimes, southern France. He was a French novelist and a short story writer. He wrote his first novel at the age of 14. His works are marked by realism and pathos. He died in 1897 at the age of 57. The Last Lesson is set in the days of the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871, in which France was defeated by Prussia, led by Bismarck. Prussia then consisted of what now are the nations of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. It's a first-person narration and story is narrated by a young boy named Franz. His observation conveys the arrogance of Prussians who attempted to rule over not only the territory of French people but also over their mind and hearts. The use of the child narrator is very effective in such stories as it allows one to talk about the most serious matters in the most innocent manner. The simple, straightforward narration by the child narrator sets the reader completely off guard. Themes of war, identity, linguistic chauvinism, uncertainty, and displacement are replete in the story. The last lesson very prominently raises the question of linguistic and cultural hegemony of the colonial and imperial powers and their lust for controlling the world and influencing their cultures and identities. So, the main theme of the story is the pain that is inflicted on the people of a territory by its conquerors by taking away the right to study or speak their own language. Sub-theme highlights student and teacher attitudes to learning and teaching. The story beautifully brings to light the sense of regret at the loss of opportunities because of the human tendency to postpone the learning of things, for one always feels that there is abundant time. It also draws the reader's attention to the approach of students, teachers, and parents to learning and teaching and human tendency to procrastinate. The Last Lesson is an appropriate title as the entire episode in the story is balanced on the last French lesson delivered by M. Hamel. Franz, the villagers, and the other students in the school at Alsace always felt that there was sufficient time to learn their lessons and so did not give due importance to school. But the unexpected order from Berlin that barred the teaching of French shook everyone. Another dominating theme which is highlighted in the text is linguistic chauvinism. The lesson highlights the idea of linguistic chauvinism, that is, one's language is superior to that of others. Loving our own language is a matter of pride. Our mother tongue is symbolic of our cultural history. However, when one starts disrespecting the language of others, it becomes a matter of linguistic chauvinism. The Germans were shown powerful in the story. They banned French and imposed German on them. By doing so, they tried to exploit them. Their purpose was to make them slave physically and mentally. It was an attempt to rule over not only the territory of French people, but also over their minds and hearts. There are two main characters in the story, M. Hamel and Franz. M. Hamel is an experienced teacher who has been teaching in that village school for 40 years. He is introduced by the narrator as very strict and cranky person. However, as the story progresses, he is seen like a true guide and a philosopher for his students. The utmost sincerity and patience that he exhibits while delivering the last lesson earns him everyone's respect. He advises the innocent villagers to pay more attention to learn their mother tongue. He urges his students to shake off procrastination and safeguard their language as it was the key to their prison. M. Hamel is thus shaped up as an ideal teacher, true guide, philosopher, and patriot to the core. The narrator of the story, Franz, is a young boy in the French region of Alsace and Lorraine. He is a dawdler when it comes to schoolwork, preferring to spend time in the woods over going to the class. He doesn't like learning his French lessons, and when the story begins, is terrified that his negligence will be found out by his teacher, the stern M. Hamel. In the end, Franz feels a great sense of remorse and regrets for not taking his French education seriously while it still had the chance. The last lesson renders a touching and emotional adieu by the teacher and his students to their national language, which is a significant aspect of an individual's identity. The story is also about the realization on the part of French people that opportunities cannot be taken for granted. Let's focus on the summary now. The story begins one fine morning when we find little Franz hurrying off to school. He's quite scared as the French teacher, M. Hamel, is supposed to question the students on the past participle, and Franz hasn't learnt it yet. With great effort, he resists the temptation to bunk his class and goes unwillingly to school. On his way to school, he had to pass the town hall and noticed a crowd in front of the bulletin board, the medium through which all of the bad news had reached them, the lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officers. He knew that there must be yet another dreadful message posted on the board, but he hurried off to school. On reaching school, he witnessed an unusual calm. The school was abnormally still. Through the window, he saw his classmates seated in their respective seats, while M. Hamel was walking up and down with his ruler. Frightened and ashamed, he entered the class. Hamel did not reprimand him for being late. Instead, he kindly asked him to sit on his place. As he sat down at his desk, he suddenly noticed that his teacher was dressed formally in his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and his black silk embroidered cap that he wore only on inspection and prize days. Again, he noticed that the back benches that are usually empty were filled with village people. He sat down there wondering what was going on when M. Hamel announced that it would be their last French lesson as an order had come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. This news came as a shock to Franz. He felt sorry for not learning his lessons properly. The books that seemed to be a burden a while ago suddenly became a very precious to give up. And the idea that his teacher, M. Hamel, was going away and would not teach them anymore made him forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Now everything made sense to him. He realized why M. Hamel was wearing his best clothes and why village elders had gathered in the back of the room. It was because they were sorry that they had not gone to school more, and their presence was a tribute to the master for his selfless and faithful service for 40 years. Hamel, however, did not let the spirits to dampen and began the last lesson with full enthusiasm. Franz was asked to recite the rules of participles, which he fumbled. He wanted to get it right, but he was too nervous and mixed everything up. Hamel did not scold him for not being able to answer correctly. Instead, he expressed his deep worry about the human tendency to take things for granted. He held everyone, including himself, responsible for the failure to learn French. He feels that parents are not very interested in their children's education. They would prefer to see the children working and earning a little money rather than learning French. He also felt bad for giving a holiday to the students when he had to go fishing. Hamel, like a true spirited teacher, devoted the entire last lesson to pass on to the students his knowledge as best as he could. He praised the French language as the clearest and the most logical language in the world. He felt that people should always cling to their own language, as he believes that when people are enslaved, it is through their language that they can find the key to their prison. He explained the grammar with patience and gave new copies to the students with France Alsace written in beautiful handwriting on them. The students too exhibited rare attention and tried to learn all that their teacher taught on that day. When Franz looked up, he saw Hamel scanning the entire class from time to time. It seemed like he wanted to capture everything about the schoolroom in his mind. When the church clock struck 12, the trumpets of the Prussian returning from their drill sounded, at which Hamel stood up, very pale in his chair. He tried to give his farewell words, but choked. He turned to the blackboard and wrote Vive la France, with the hope that the French language will be appreciated for what it is. So in the end, Hamel signed off his last lesson by writing in big letters the message Long live France on the board and dismissed the class. So students, this is the complete summary of the story, The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. If you want to download the concept map, the link is given in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. Please do give your valuable comments in the comment box. Like, share and subscribe. English Tutorials by Poonam Thakur.